expected, or you folks are expected to do here, but I could choose whatever I wanted to give a wine class on, and I wasn't thrust into the Rieslings. I'm the adoptive parent who flat out chose them. You have a very beautiful German wine list here. It's very much upper-end German wines. It's been well chosen, it's well balanced. We're going to look at 4 of them that you have in stock and 2 others that we brought in just for this tasting, one of which has a good chance of being part of your By the Glass core program. Now last time I wasn't at all nervous, but of course I wasn't being filmed. We ran into 2 of the participants in the parking lot. What is it, Paul Kirby and who's the other, the Hunt?
John Hunt.
Yes, John Hunt, and they were very sketchy on some of the magnificence of the great logic that I led them through. So I'm going to simplify things this time, and I very, very much encourage you to ask questions. I'm not a very good straight line thinker, so I'm going to go off in many directions at once while we go from the big picture down to the individual wines. While I wasn't engrossing enough to keep their attention, on the other hand, I partially blame Dee Dee, who was so polite as to greet me before the presentation, and she came running up, "Hello, Marilyn, how nice to see you again." Marilyn Chambers is a famous porn star. I have read, I go to these conferences on wine education, and there's an appalling statistic that 83% of any given audience is actually thinking about sex when you're up here just working yourself to death. Since she brought it into the public arena, perhaps some of the audience was lost that way because the similarity between the 2 of us is really undeniable. 2 arms, 2 legs, I can see that big time. All right, why German wine? German wine because the time is right for it. You are going to be on the crescent of the wave of introducing German wines to your customers. It really honestly is not quite happening yet. To me, it's just amazing how little very, very sophisticated people actually know about wine. I know because I keep track. I came from another field. I was a stockbroker, had a very bad car crash, spent a year in bed, and made my hobby my business, namely switched from finances to wine. I brought over the habit of a lifetime of keeping track of people's investments. I keep track of their wine buying. I have records on 7,000 customers. We share many of the same customers. I write down what they're buying and what they're having it with. My part of the industry, the retail part, is very much to blame for people not knowing about German wines. Wine and Spirit magazine is a trade consumer publication that I'm sure Woody devours, as do I, talked about the results of a huge retail survey out of 7 countries whose wine retail shops recommended and sold. Germany was last on that list. Out of 7 grape varietals, Riesling was last. They even sell more Shiraz than they sell Riesling. And that's just really sad. I mean, I love Shiraz also, but Riesling is a beautiful, beautiful food match, and it's grown all over the world. There's a ton more Riesling produced than there is Shiraz. So we in the retail business, who are important in educating the consumer, we need to get on that bandwagon. You in the restaurant business need to get on that bandwagon because it is the best wine to start people out on. It's a wonderful beginner's wine, and people who really know wine aren't going to tire of it. It's not like a white Zinfandel that has charm, to be sure, but has no complexity, does not go the distance. Riesling absolutely, definitely does. When I started out in this business a couple of years ago, I asked every customer, how did you learn about wine? I wanted to know what their path, because many of us grow up in non-wine drinking families, or if you're from down here, a non-drinking area of the country, period. The number one answer, with no close second, was restaurants. I had the wine in a restaurant. And that's the one thing they remember when they come in and get cosmically overwhelmed by row after row after row of wine bottles. They had something in a restaurant and they liked it. It's a problem for me because it normally is on an expense account, or they're a guest, or a sommelier recommends it, and they spend more there in the restaurant setting, and then they want that same experience for $5 in the retail shop. But you folks are the first line of teaching people about wine and about wine and food. And we're both on that same side of the table. Many of the people in the wine industry, the winemakers, the wine salespeople, the distributors, they're all trying to push one particular wine. Retailers who work at specialty shops can just talk about wine in general. I do not. At least half of my wine, working in a grocery store as I do, people come with their meal already chosen, with the ingredients already in their basket, and you then have to work backwards and figure out what wine will match that. You here in the restaurant have to do the same darn thing. You have to do a needs assessment of what your table is going to eat and see what the best wine that will please the most people happens to be. And again, I say Riesling is a good answer for that. The third part of that equation, the retail shops where people buy wine, the restaurants where people come to have wine in the setting of a good meal. The third part of that is the consumers who actually buy the wine. Every single wine publication and gourmet publication you can think of, in the notes that I was scrounging through like a drowning woman, I have, and of course unknown to me now where they are, I have a whole list of magazines that have had article after article after article of how and why Riesling is the best food choice. It's the Wine and Food Companion, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, Gourmet, the Wine Spectator. It just goes on and on. People are reading this stuff, so they're getting the message. If it's not being sold in the retail shops, if Riesling is last and Germany is last, then step to the plate and act on what the wine food press is already handing you on a silver platter. I assure you it is happening in Germany. They are extremely thorough people, extremely. In 10 years, we'll all be taking orders from Germany. You know what their quality control standards are. You know that as soon as they digest Eastern Europe, Eastern Germany, they are going to be a potent social and economic force. Every magazine, every newspaper, you can't do anything in Germany that wine-food pairing isn't being explored. So they're taking care of that part for you as well. People who go to Germany come back with beautiful tales of the wines they've been offered and the foods they've been offered. So it's in the public consciousness, and it's up to us to actually slap that bottle in their hands or recommend it when people are hesitating what to have in this restaurant in particular with their first courses. The one thing Riesling and German wines do not go with are what you built your reputation on. They do not go with beef and they do not go with lamb. They simply don't have the extract or the alcohol or the tannin to stand up to those generous, beautifully flavored meats. So the fact that your wine list is hardly touched, Hank says you sell approximately a bottle a week, not counting the Peace Porter Gold Trupchen. That makes sense to me. If you have not had German wine tastings before, you haven't really thought about it. Nobody who's less than 110 years old really knows German wines at their glory. And in just a few minutes, we're going to go into a little bit of that history. But let us, before they warm up too much, let's just taste these wines. Number one, you can see from your tasting notes, is the one that you do by the glass, and you already sell 2 cases of it. It is imperative that you serve German wine frosty cool, a good 50-degree temperature. It's got such flowery qualities to it that it does better crisper. So we're going to have small pours now, and Then when I'm through talking, when we've had all 6 wines, I'm going to ask you to dump out what's in your glass, and we're going to pass the cold bottles down the row. So ones that you like, we can go back and look at cold with cold, not against the ones that have warmed up to room temperature. My thesis is, very simply, German wines are the wines of the 90s. They give you an awful lot for low calories, low alcohol. They give you a beautiful aroma. Long before you even get it close, you can smell that aroma. It's not closed in at all. They give you a great deal of complexity in your mouth and a very, very long finish. All of it in a package with 8% alcohol, as opposed to most California Chardonnays that are a good 12 to 15. I brought a visual aid this time. You do not have 500 millimeter bottles here at the grill yet. It's a new size that just got approved about a year ago, and I think we're going to see a great many more bottlings in this size because it's 4 glasses as opposed to 6. It's perfect for 2 people. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but with my new idea based on our parking lot conversations after my last tasting, that it's good to emphasize all the points that I really, really want you to remember. You get as many calories in this as in this. For people who are health conscious, for those of you in the back, that really is quite amazing. Also the same amount of alcohol. That is where most of the calories in wine come from. So they're healthy wines. They have the finish. That makes them such a lovely food wine for the taste to keep on lingering. There's no way you can literally get a pouch of wine and sneak some food in there. You need to have a wine that has the ability to just keep on in your mouth delivering the flavor after you have swallowed it. All this happens without the hotness, without the heaviness of a lot of alcohol, without the thunderstroke of a great deal of oak, with a lot of clarity of flavor, and yes, with a little bit of sweetness. This is a word that your customers hate, but there's got to be some way that we can convey what this wine means without turning them off. I have a great deal of trouble selling sweeter wines, and any food at all that is spicy benefits very much from a sweet wine. Any food that has any little bit of sweetness itself, many of which your appetizers do, you have to have a sweet wine. If you have too dry of a wine, the wine is hollow and sour and sharp. So a slightly sweet wine is a very good aspect to have, and the German wines have it, but they also have a beautiful acidity. Even the dessert wines have a strong backbone of acid, which is what lets you match them with food so well. Okay, let's come out of the general and into the specific. Jorvon Kesselstadt. The German, by the way, it looks extremely hard to pronounce because all the words are 16 letters long, but it's like Spanish, and unlike English or French, there are no silent letters. There is not anything that will be pronounced differently in different contexts. I have some of these. I've written them down phonetically. I think it's important that you pronounce them correctly. I would like to see everybody choose 1 or 2 that they feel comfortable with and be able to rather authoritatively give the customer a sentence or 2 as to why you, the wait staff, likes them and why you think they're going to go with a particular food that you are recommending. And part of that is pronouncing them correctly. Part of it also is the fact that your customers are not going to be able to pronounce them correctly. We dealt with this in the last tasting. I didn't know how you folks handled it. If you corrected people at the table, but you do not. You bring it back and say it the right way. Let me give you one very important German pronunciation rule. When you have 2 vowels together, you always pronounce the second one. Riesling is R-I-E-S-L-I-N-G. The E is the second one. It's pronounced Riesling. One of the fourth wine we're going to have, the Achfenner Bachstein. The last word is Stein, that means stone. S-T-E-I-N. The I is the second vowel, so it's pronounced Stein. Many, many, many people are going to come to you asking for a Riesling. That's fine. Just bring it back and say, here is your Pease Porter Goldtrupchen Riesling. Okay. The ER on the end of the first word that you see up and down the page means village of. So Pease Porter is from the village of Peaseport. Goldtrupchen is the name of the vineyard. There are more than one producer, bad grammar there, in the Goldtrupchen. In fact, there are 14, but Von Kesselstadt is one of the most famous. What that word means is a little drop of gold. It's a beautifully situated natural amphitheater that was used very actively in Roman times, in fact. So it's a beautiful natural setting that's up here in the Mosel. The Mosel has the green bottles, the Rhine has the brown bottles. Ever was it thus? It goes back way far into history. In fact, the Mosel and the Rhine wine have a long, proud history. Back when the Germanic tribes were still painting themselves blue and cutting the mistletoe, just as they did in England, out of the trees, they were raising wine. It wasn't this kind of a wine. It was an indigenous grape, kind of like our Scuppernong in North Carolina. But there is a great deal of scholastic debate as to whether Riesling came out of that native grape or the Romans brought it up from the Rhone Valley. But in any event, by 2,000 years ago, actually by 100 BC, there was a lot of wine being planted in the Mosel in particular, because that was the headquarters of the Roman Empire that far north in Trier. Somewhat later, several hundred years later, that's where Constantine grew up. It also was where Karl Marx grew up. But we have beautiful Roman poets that go back to just after the death of Christ that talk about raising wine there. The number one wine that your customers are going to know, besides Liebfraumilch and Celler Schwarze Katze and those kind of wines, the number one is this Pease Porter Goldtrupchen. Almost everybody knows it. So you're starting ahead of the game by having a name brand that they are familiar with. The von Kesselstadt family is a royal family. Reichsgraf means that that is a duke who has the right to own land. So he had his own little kingdom there. The firm was built on the remains of a Roman glass factory. They did really interesting excavations, and stuff they found is in the museum. They have a palace, and that palace was built by one of the most famous architects of the Baroque of Germany in the 1370s. One of the early von Kesselstadts was put in charge of all the wine for the Mosel region. In the middle 1700s, another von Kesselstadt was in charge of tearing up all the lesser grape varieties and planting the noble grape of Riesling everywhere. They've been Mr. It in wine for a long, long time. They've been in high aristocracy, and they've got a wonderful pedigree. Many of these German families go back to the Dark Ages. They go back to the 700s, the 800s, the 900s. The Germans do everything with care and with analysis. And once they get going on presenting these wines to the world, you're not going to be able to stop this tidal flow. So I say, get with it now. In these same trade publications, they published the result of a big survey of restaurant wine service that was in the Wine Spectator. The restaurants didn't come off a whole lot better than the retail shops did. 70% of restaurant customers say they are looking for help with the wine and with the wine-food matching. Only 7% of those people surveyed said they were now getting it. Now, most of those restaurants are not the Angus Barn. They do not invest the time and the energy and the money in gathering you here for fear of severe punishment from Hank. But they invest a lot of time and trouble in having you on the cutting edge of being able to recommend wine. So as we drink through these, I ask that you please consider what foods these might go with. Very fruity aroma. Can we agree on that? Rich, full, kind of round. This is not a skimpy wine. See, already I've let mine get too warm. Can you feel that acid? About 2/3 of the way back in your mouth. How many people like this wine? For how many people is it too sweet? See what I mean about that mouth-filling and long finish? This thing just explodes with fruit in your mouth, and that taste goes on and on. Okay, the second one is probably the second, or we're going to have the top 3 most famous German wines today, and I'm not sure if they, do I need to stay in one space?
No.
Okay, the second one is also a Mosel wine, which is between these two. It's the middle Mosel. It's the most famous part of the Mosel. This one you may need to write down phonetically. The W is pronounced V. So it's Veltliner, not Wailener. Veltliner, Sonnenor. Sonnen or O-O-R, I guess is how you would do that phonetically. What that means is sundial. There is an immense sundial that is carved into the rocky face of the cliffs there. It also has a number of owners, and we have 2 of them right here. 430 is the Deinhardt, and 431 is the Vines Prune. I don't think you need to say the producer when you sell these wines. Most people are not going to know this. Mercifully, wine laws in Germany were updated in 1971. There still are some serious problems with the wine laws, but prior to 71, there were 30,000 sites that you had to learn. I mean, obviously nobody learned them, but there were 30,000 different sites that could be on a label, and they also had 11 levels of quality. The fine, the finest, the very finest, the high fine, the high very finest. I mean, it was just absolutely unthinkable. We're now down to a little over 2,500, which is still a lot to learn, but it's not 30,000. They also used to have astoundingly ornate labels with huge amounts of data on them in Gothic German script. Who on earth could read that? There are lots of double S's in German. It looks like an F in the old script. All of that is going away. There's a big movement in Germany now, a big movement for dry wines. And Hank and Woody and I are going to go on up to Washington later this summer. The man that I get a lot of my German wines from has some that I think will be beautiful food matches here for the barn, so we're going to take a look at those. So you're going to get even drier ones coming, but they are simplifying the labels. They're simplifying the 11 major growing regions, and the ones that are the lighter ones and the crisper ones are going to be these Mosel wines. Okay, this one's a little less flowery to me. Will you people please help me out with the adjectives? I can't make my cortex work and think of all these facts and also make my sensual side work and evaluate aroma and taste. I can't shuttle back and forth too easily. I also can't drink a lot of wine and continue to speak to you. So anybody in the audience at all who has adjectives for how these 2 wines strike you, I'd appreciate hearing them.
I think the second one's got more acidity than the first one.
It does, more lemony, substantially more. And for people who say, oh, I don't want a sweet wine, and yet they're the designated driver, it doesn't have the grassy herbaceousness that a Sauvignon Blanc does, doesn't have the heavy alcohol that a Chardonnay does. I think this is your answer right here. I think a manly man could have this wine. You know, this is not just something that the Bridge Club ladies, I mean, we're not talking a perception problem of quiche here. These German wines will deliver, and for grown-ups, not just for kids. Okay, if you can pour the next two wines, please.
Oh my God.
Let me talk a little bit about growing wine in Germany. It's a challenge. It's an extraordinary challenge. I grew up in Stratford, Connecticut, and I always thought that we were across from England. Stratford, Connecticut is across from Portugal. The growing regions in Germany are the furthest in the highest latitudes anywhere in the world. What I mean is that nothing in Chile or New Zealand is as far south as the wine-growing regions of Germany are as far north. It's across from Newfoundland and Labrador. Every minute on the vine is important to German wine production. In Germany, some levels of quality, they're allowed to add sugar. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. In California, they've got all that blue sky, nothing but blue sky, and it bakes the acid out, so they don't have enough acid. So California is allowed to, and traditionally does, add acid to the wine. They never tell you that, but they do it. And not only does Germany add sugar, but so does Bordeaux, and so does Burgundy. None of the wines that you serve at the Angus Barn will ever have added sugar. You're not allowed to, or the levels that we're at, they're the higher level of German wines, and even the dessert wines have no sugar added. So you can assure your dinner guests that these are natural wines. What do you do so far north? You evaluate the wine most uniquely in Germany as opposed to any place else on the degree of ripeness. No place else in the world does that. There's no special growing area in Germany. Theoretically, any estate can produce the top quality wines. You don't have to be from some special town in Burgundy or some special estate as in Bordeaux. You just need to get a particular degree of ripeness. In the little books that you have from the German Trade Bureau, on page 20 and 21, they talk about that. This from my parking lot conversations. I did not drive home well enough. On your, on your wine list, you have each individual area. You have under Mosel, Saar, Ruhr, you have Kabinett, and then Spätlese, and then Auslese. And then for the Rheingau, you start over, and for the Rhine-Pfalz, you start over. The highest level of German wines are called QMP, Qualitätswein mit Prädikat. You don't need to know that. What this means are quality wines with a pedigree. They've got to come from one of these fancy growing areas, of which there are 2,400 in 11 major bigger areas, but you have to have sufficient natural sugar that you don't need to add. Now the sugar isn't for the sweetness, the sugar is to give you the alcohol. I have a statistic which chances are, oh yeah, I have it right here. It makes a huge difference. Here's the Mosel, here's the Rhine. This is not far away, especially with their autobahns. The difference between the Mosel and the Rhine is one, the Mosel averages 9.8 Celsius and the Rhine 10.1. My goodness, that's 0.3% of difference. The sunshine hours, one is 1,580, one is 1,712. Again, that's hardly anything in terms of difference. Yet down in this area of Germany, they can grow figs and they can grow apricots and they can grow almonds, and they can't grow any of that in the Mosel. These tiny little gradations of difference matter a great, great deal. Cabinet is the best wine and the driest of the QMP wines. What that term refers to is that it was locked in the cabinet. It's the stuff you put away. It wasn't the everyday topple wine here, the table wine. It was the stuff that was the best stuff. Spätlese. In German, the S with a consonant is pronounced sh. So it's not Spätlese, it's Spätlese. Spätlese means 7 extra days on the vine. Now, in this kind of northern climate, you're taking a big risk. It's not snow, it's sleet or frost that are going to get your grapes. So that 7-day waiting window there can cause you to lose the whole crop. But it will give you more sugar in the grape. And the thing that you have to remember that makes it rather confusing is they get their Kabinett, Spätlese, Auslese rating, not based on what the wine ends up in your glass tasting like, but what the ripeness of the grapes was picked at. So we're going to have a Spätlese in this comparison here, which really isn't perceptibly sweeter than the regular Kabinett. It has more alcohol. Higher sugar level means you have more sugar to turn into alcohol. They can still ferment them out as dry as they want them to be, but traditionally Spätleses are fuller and a little bit sweeter. Of the two that we have here now, you have the one that's written in, the Lorentzhofer. This one is from the Ruhr, which is one of the major tributaries of the Mosel. And the second one that you are having, the Achfenner Bachstein, is from the Saar, the other major tributary. Now, these two are substantially further south than the Mosel that goes all the way up here, but they're much colder. And they're colder because they're river valleys that cold air just barrels through. In the Mosel, for each mile that it goes northeast, and this is the way the Mosel drains, making it very confusing because the lower Mosel is north of the upper Mosel, but that has to do with going from higher ground to lower, but you don't need to know that. For every mile northeast, the river turns 7 miles back and forth, east and west. I tried very hard to find a photograph to show you what kind of circumstances they harvest wine in the Saar and in the Mosel. It is amazing. These things are steep like that, and I mean literally like that. How many of you have been there? One. Can you attest to how steep they are? It's astounding. I mean, it is nothing short of astounding. They have iron stakes driven into the vineyards, and just as on some mountains, if you're a climber, they've got these cables run through them. That's how the vintners go up and down the fields, hand over hand, up and down. They bring, when the soil, well, it's not actually soil, but when it goes to the bottom of the hill, they bring it back in baskets in 1992. This is the technology, in baskets on their back. They replenish it. The tractors are hoisted up and down in winches because there's no way that they can otherwise be brought in. Well, what makes it all doable and makes these wines what they are is it's not grown in soil. There is not dirt there. There are plenty of growing regions in the world where there isn't dirt. If you've ever been to the Rhone, that's the end of a glacier, where a glacier melted. There's no dirt. There are rocks that big, and those roots go way, way down deep. Here, and more in the Mosel than the Rhine, but the Rhine has it as well, it's all slate. That character of slatiness, that kind of mineral stoniness, you can get that in the wine. That is very, very typical of the Mosel wines. That slate is very good because when it rains, and it rains a lot in Germany, there's no soil there to suck it up, the rainwater, and plump out the grapes. It just drops down through the soil, through the rocks. The slate also reflects back heat, and that's also important. It holds heat during the day like a body of water will do, and releases it bit by bit at night. That helps the grapes ripen. It also doesn't slide down the hill with every rain. I don't mean that it doesn't eventually, but regular soil, I mean, it would be bald and bare after 2,000 years of winemaking if it were not this rocky soil. So that is its glory, and it also is its penance, because it is very, very hard to produce these kinds of wines. Now, heaven knows there are wines that are raised in Germany on big, flat parcels where tractors go up and down, and they have the same kind of agribusiness as Gallo does. Those are the Liebfraumilches. But the kind of wine that you're going to be having here is very hard run from the soil. Those 7 extra days, I just learned something just yesterday, just in time for this tasting, when I was sharing with the staff at Wellspring what was wrong with Murphy Brown's baby birth scene. Having most reluctantly had natural childbirth, they didn't do justice. Murphy got tired, but it didn't choke. The contractions coming every 8 seconds. But I was talking about this divine process, and someone who was there was talking about their premature baby. In the second, you're pregnant for 9 months, in the 8th month, that baby gains half a pound a week. And in the last month, it gains a pound a week. And I couldn't understand how a baby that was only 2 months premature was a 2.5-pound baby. I would have thought it would have been further along. No, it's exponential growth at the end. It gets very big, very fast. Same darn thing with wine. All the time that those grapes hang on the vine through bud break in late April and May, June, July, August, they're green, they're hard, they're little. Not a whole lot happens. The last 5-6 weeks, when they start getting color and plumping out and taking an extract, that's where all the action is. And it's every bit as fast as that baby inside you. Boom, 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 there it goes. So an extra 7 days is like an extra pound on that newborn. It really, really matters. So they try and get as many Spätlesers as they can. Some vintages it works out, some it does not. Being so far north, only 1 out of 3 German vintages traditionally has been a good one. You again are in the right place at the right time, because they have had 3 spectacular vintages in a row. It has not happened in this century. I do not know when it has happened, and all the zillions of things I've read, none of them address it, but at some point I will have that fact. The person who can answer it is in Germany right now. But 3 in a row, I mean, we're in 1992. That hasn't happened in 92 years. You've got the 88s, the 89s, and 90s. These wines are going to be around for quite a while for you to sell. The other joy of German wines is that it is not like our beautiful California Cabernets that maybe you need to drink them in 1994, and maybe you need to drink them in 1998, and maybe 2001, and maybe you need to decant it an hour, or maybe 4 hours. German wines are ready to drink when they hit these shores. They're ready to go. So you don't have to worry about that. Very, very rarely do they need some bottle time, and certainly not in these 3 ripe vintages. When the years are difficult, when they're mean, when they're what the Germans call stallig, steely, then you might need some time to integrate that acid. But in these, you do not. On the other hand, they live a long, long, long time. I'm still drinking German wines from the 70s. They have, because they've got some intrinsic sweetness, that helps wine last. Some of the longest-lived wines are the Sauternes, which they're still drinking Sauternes from the 1830s. The German wines have the sweetness to last, and they have the acid backbone. Always that balance. That's what you're playing off against each other in German wines. Enough acid to stand up to the sweetness, enough sweetness to tame the acid. Both of those allow them to last. A statistic that pleases me very much, I'm always interested in history, and I had a tasting at Wellspring this year where we had Madeiras that went back to 1954, 1880, 1845, and 1830. But those are fortified wines. To have a 161-year-old wine is not terrifically hard when you can add all that alcohol to make it 20% alcohol. In German wines, the vintage of 1540 was drunk in 1961. Can you let me just imagine that? 1540, still beautiful in 1961. Now that was a very unusual vintage, 24 years before Shakespeare was born, I might add. That was the year that it was so hot that the Rhine dried up. I mean, there were just little puddles, but literally the Rhine evaporated. And that year, wine was less expensive than water. So the extraordinary amount of extract in that wine kept it going all that time. But Thomas Jefferson, who was our French ambassador in the 1780s, he was drinking German wines from the 1720s. Goethe's mother in the early 1800s had many different vintages in her cellar, and her favorite was 1706. That was 100 years old. These wines will last. So again, that for you, I don't know that you can particularly fit that into conversation table side, but it relieves you of a lot of stress trying to figure out, do you need to let them breathe or not? No, you don't. Okay. Lorenzhofer. That wine, I'm going to read you some reviews of it, and you can see if you agree. This is what they say about the one that is in your glass right this minute. Beautiful smell. Comes on crisp and spritzy. Has gorgeous balance, so easy to drink. Mouth-wateringly keen. Dry finish leaves you begging for more. Forget the cliche, but this really is like a glass of springtime. I did not write that. Robert Parker gave it an 88. He called it very fruity, very lively. That's a good mark for Mr. Parker. Stuart Piggott, who is the man in German wine scholarship, called it outstanding. You do not have this one on your wine list yet. I don't know, Hank, I'm afraid, has just stepped out. I do not know. He's bought some, so I suspect you have the ability to be able to sell it. It's a very beautiful area because it is colder than the Mosel or the Rhine. In warm years, it makes the very, very best wine in Germany because it still keeps that backbone of acidity. The second wine that we're tasting in this flight, the Achfenner Bachstein. Again, an S and a consonant in German is not Stein, it's Stein. It's the SH one. That's one of the most famous of the Czar wines. The Czar actually has gotten a whole lot better recently when they built some lakes and they widened the river. A little more water helps moderate the climate, just as the slate does. It absorbs heat and then gives it off slowly at night. What that whole thing isn't there where you have in the label there, but it's Forstmeister. That is the director of forest services for the Prussian Empire. That's the guy who started this winery. Or if he did not start it, he probably did not start it. They're very much in the habit of rewarding political favors to their generals and their statesmen and their bureaucrats with wineries. So that's the one that he has. The number 3 is a regular Kabinett, and the number 4 is a Spätlese that was 7 days further on the vine. Any comments about the difference between these two?
Sweeter and less acidic.
Which one?
The fourth one seems to be less acidic than the other. And a little sweet. Yeah, not unless I got it backwards.
The sour as the cabinets are, there's more sugar balances it out and makes the one smoother.
Smoother? Okay, so both of you think the number 4 is a smoother, richer wine? Am I paraphrasing that?
Not as much acid. Sweet.
Longer finish.
On 4. More subtle nose, I think. To me, it's a rather earthy nose. I think that's the slate. What you're smelling there, that's the slate smell. I would agree with that. Less perceptible acid, more sweetness.
Does that have something to do with more sugar? Maybe it's got more sugar, so if you got more sugar, you got less acidity, or is there a comparison? More acidity, less sweetness.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a clear difference in acid between these two, and I think it's because of the extra ripeness in the Spätlese. There's more residual sugar there in it. But this is not horribly sweet. We're not talking dessert wine level here. Now, you've got the Cabinet, and you have the Spätlese. The next level, which you also sell, but they were too expensive for us to uncork them here, is Auslese. Similarly, not a thick syrupy wine. We are not talking a Sauternes here, but what that means is picked out. Lese is picking, harvest, if you will. Auslese, they go through and they get bunch by bunch. They make many passes through the vineyard. The next level beyond that, which you do not have, is Baron Auslese. They go through and take grape by grape, as they do in Sauternes. Chateau Yquem, they may make 22 passes through the vineyard. Highly, highly labor intensive. You would not be able to sell those in a restaurant setting for probably less than $250. And in fact, I'm sure it would be a lot more, because I was looking at the reviews of these 3 vintages in the wine press, and their retail cost is over $200. So don't even worry about that one, but just so your knowledge is complete, the final level is Trockenbeere Auslese, and that means dried berry picked out. They let the darn things go to raisins, and by now you're way into the end of November. Risky, risky business. And they go and pick each little rotted grape. They have edelfoil, they have botrytis, the noble rot, makes them look like the devil. And in fact, I believe there are pictures in your little booklet of what they look like. Maybe you're right about that. Really, maybe not. They look horrible, but they get all white and yucky, and the grape kind of collapses, and the water evaporates, and it is the essence of fruit acid and fruit sugar. Even though they're quite sweet, they still have that backbone as well. But for you, the Auslese, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, the picture is not in this book. I thought it was. I beg your pardon? Sorry. But see, you got some physical movement looking for it. They have nice pictures of the grapes, and some other thing that I've used to prepare for this shows the regular bunch, and then the one that has that noble rot on it. The Auslese level that you have, these wines are expensive, but I think you can begin to understand why they are so expensive. They're risky, they're rare, and they're labor intensive. What they're beautiful with is any kind of a not terrifically sweet dessert. They're not sweet enough to go against your chocolate chess pie or whatever that walking inner thigh applicator dessert is that you serve here. They're not sweet enough for that. But with a cheesecake, they're beautiful because they have the acid to cut through the richness of the cheesecake. With strawberries and cream, they're beautiful. They have the acid to cut through the cream and the sweetness to match the strawberries. With any kind of a fruit dessert, an apple pie, anything like that, the Auslese is a beautiful choice. Okay.
But we can't afford them, so the Auslese.
Yeah, the Ausleses are expensive, yes.
Is there a German wine that comes in a blue bottle?
A German wine that comes in a blue bottle, yes there is. And it is a very, very beautiful bottle. It's a deep kind of greeny cobalt blue. I mean, it's kind of like an aquamarine bottle. And I'm not, or excuse me, not aquamarine. It's a deep blue green. It's not the blue of cobalt blue. I don't actually know where that is from. I've only seen the bottle once, but it is a marketing ploy that one of these new little areas that's fighting for prominence here is trying to establish as something that's not green and not brown. I will get the answer for you.
I had customers several years ago try to tell me about a German wine that we didn't have on our list, that it came in a blue bottle, and I just remembered it, but I don't know anything else about it other than a German wine in a blue bottle.
I have encountered it, but it couldn't be of prime importance because I have read so many sources to try and boil this down. In fact, it probably is not apparent to you as I stand here, but it hasn't come up in any of those discussions, but it does exist, and your customer was right. There is another sort of bottle that comes from Germany, and that you don't have it on this wine list, but at some point you may, because those are the Franconian wines from over here that are dry. They've always been dry. They've never ever been sweet. And that bottle is called a Boxbeutel, and it's round and stubby like that. It's not round like that, it's that shape. It's kind of only that wide front to back, but it's that shape with a little little neck to it, and that comes straight out of what the Romans went into when they came out of the amphora. So that has very, very long historic antecedents, and they continue to do their wine that way. And because it always is dry wine, they never were part of the sweet wine craze, that's a wine that the barn may look to getting at some point. Okay, while we pour, I neglected to do it on 1 and 2. Could I please, if you can remember, can I please see a show of hands how many preferred the Peace Porter Gold Trupchen versus the Walener Sonnenor? How many preferred the Peace Porter? How many preferred Peace Porter? We're going all the way back to the beginning. Peace Porter is number 1. Oh dear, that's the by the glass pour, and not 10% of you like it. How about the Walener Sonnenor? So you like the crisper, the one that's not quite so flowery, okay? How about the second flight that we have just done? The Lorenz Hofer, that's number 3, versus the Achfenner Bachstein. Okay? Well, no, we need to know this because what I would like to do, we're going to go through these 6 wines, and then, as I said, we're going to re-pour them when they're cold. And I frankly think, rather than trying to just take all of this data in, that literally, in the real world, how do you manage or how do you evaluate success? For me, it'll make me feel that I've accomplished something if you sell more than a bottle of German wine per week, not counting the by the glass pour, or if the by the glass pour increases. I'm not saying that money is the measure of all things, but at least we'll have some way of tracking whether you've gotten more excited about these and have been able to excite your customers. So when we go back and have them all together cold, we're going to talk about wine-food matching. And at that point, we're going to choose some adjectives for each one of these that you might just simply write down on your program to remind you of this. I'm as interested as the next person, and more so probably, on all what the history of this area is, but I want to give you very, very practical suggestions that will help you sell more wine and sell a wine that better pleases your customers. Okay, as you pass out the last 2 wines, I'd like to talk a little bit about history. Okay, 100 years ago, German wine was it. It was not French wine, and it was not French cuisine. The Germans ruled the roost. All the fancy restaurants in the second half of the 1800s, and actually in the first half as well in New York City, were German. They were not French. I'm going to give you just a few comparisons here, and these are for good Bordeaux vintages. 1865, wonderful, wonderful year in Bordeaux. Schloss Johannesburg, which you are being poured right this minute. That's your wine number 5. That wine cost almost 50% more than Chateau Lafite, one of the 5 first growths. There are pages and pages of statistics that show the German wines versus the wines of the rest of the world. They were the wines that people chose. As late as 1900, Liebfraumilch cost more than Margaux, more than Léoville, another beautiful Bordeaux wine. Now, part of the reason for that was that Queen Victoria married Prince Albert. He was a German prince. He brought his taste for German wines. Not to mention the fact that the earlier kings, the George III, the Georges that lost the United States, they were all from Hanover. They were all German as well. So that the British aristocracy really grew up with these German wines. Well, then what happens? World War I. German wines were not the thing that you drank when they're produced by the enemy. They get back from World War I. You saw upstairs, downstairs, the aristocratic class no longer had immense houses with many servants and a zillion decanted wines. They no longer had the elaborate meals. The Victorians and the Edwardians had meals of many courses. They had sweet and savory courses. The German wines were absolutely beautiful with those savory courses. So the young men were wiped out in World War I. The aristocratic classes went away, and wine drinking habits changed. Bam, then we're in a worldwide depression. It wasn't just the United States that was in that depression, the whole world was. So what was happening with the sale of German wines? Nobody had money, period, let alone to buy German wines. Then from 1939 on, Germany is the enemy again. No German wines from even the top producers were shipped to Britain in a 10-year span, from 39 to 49. So what on earth was happening to the German wine market? That's why I say you have to be 110 years old to have known German wines in their heyday. Okay, we get post-war. We have some wonderful vintages, 53, 59, wonderful vintages in Germany. How many Americans were drinking foreign wine in those days? Some of the GIs came back home talking about it, to be sure, but we weren't into the big wine culture then. That really didn't start coming up until really the early 70s. Germany is occupied. It's occupied after World War II now by the Russians, the French, the British, and mainly the Americans. Historians blame it on the Americans. Okay, what else? Of course. But they call it the GI factor. That the GIs who were there, who had the money, who ruled the roost, who made all the administrative decisions, they were raised on Coca-Cola, and they were raised on American beer, which is very sweet by international standards. You don't have the hoppy bitterness that most of the other beers of the world have. They wanted something sweet. And since they had the money, that was done. Also, however, the German people had a very, very difficult time towards the end of World War II. They were very calorically deprived. They needed the energy from sugar. They didn't have sugar. You can't produce sugar cane in Germany. And as the war effort rolled on, they had no access to sweet stuff, so they craved it. The finer German wines, the higher level, are all sweet, and they had pent-up demand. And as they got more money, like a decade after the war, they wanted the finer things. So they participated in this as well. The third part of this triangle is that technology helped out. Before, all German wines, except these late harvested wines with this noble rot, they were all dry wines. They did not have the technology to stop the fermentation with some residual grape sugar still in the wine, because that sugar is unstable. It can continue to turn into alcohol. The way that you make it stable is a ton of SO2, sulfur dioxide, to kill the yeast that turns sugar into alcohol and the bacteria that do that. If you put too much sulfur dioxide, you can smell it, you can taste it. So they couldn't go hog wild putting sulfur dioxide. So all these wines that the world prized all these hundreds and hundreds of years, they were not sweet wine like Liebfraumilch. What happened is technology gave them cold fermentation, gave them computer chips in the fermenting tanks to control the temperature, gave them mesh screens to filter the wine, to get a lot of this stuff out without having to kill it with the SO2. So suddenly, they had the GIs with the money wanting sweet stuff, they had the Germans wanting sweet stuff, and they had the technology to do sweet stuff. So German inexpensive wine became the wine bargain of the world. It took over from the Matus Rosés, from the Chilicella Lambruscos and the Suave as being the bulk cheap wine. And that's what many of your customers, that's the only thing they know about German wines. They know Blue Nun, they know Liebfraumilch, and they know Black Cellar Cat. One of your, I can't remember her name, but one of your waitstaff here was at a restaurant in Myrtle Beach, and they sold the wine by the Black Cat, or by Liebfraumilch, means milk of the Blessed Virgin, and by the picture of the Virgin. That, that was the marketing logo, and that was all that they needed to have on their wine list. You have to overcome that perception. You have to fight hard. I told this story in the last tasting. I had a customer in a wine tasting I gave at Wellspring where I had 5 different grapes, each one vinified 2 ways by 2 different countries. So you could see what a different style you can do with the same product. And we had a bone-dry, intensely fruity, a little bit bitter Alsatian Riesling against a German Riesling, a Spätlese, that had that softer fruitiness. And the woman would not sip the German wine. And she said it reminded her of too many times hung over the porcelain goddess throwing up at East Carolina University, where she had too much Liebfraumilch in her undergraduate days. You really have to fight back, because that is all that people know. Most of your educated consumers have not had these upper-end German wines. But with all the publicity, with German quality, I mean, clearly Leica cameras and BMWs, the world knows Germany does nothing in a shabby way. And with these 3 good vintages, it's time to overcome all that's historically hanging around and say, sir, I think it's time to try German wines again. If you have passed out the last 2 wines, you have neglected to include me. Perhaps I'm already slurring my words. If so, I apologize for that. These last 2 are Rhine wines. Number 5 is the Johannesburg Riesling. Just like with, how am I doing on time? Oh, pretty well. 25 after 3. Yes. I'm sorry, I could only hear the ice. I still can't hear you. Significance of something on...
The elongated.
Oh, I do not know, and Alsatian wines are the same way. I do not know historically why they did that. I'm sorry, I have no idea, but I have never ever seen a German wine, even the new style, the dry ones, they're not in the more standard bottles. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. The reason I went up, by the way, through all the levels of richness on up to the Trockenbeeren Auslese is because there's going to be some confusion with your customers. They're going to know, and they never say that all the way out either. They go TBA, QMP. They use a lot of, when you have words that long, you use abbreviations. But Trocken means dry. And the new movement in German wines is for dry wines. And the very driest are Trocken, which I personally don't believe they have yet perfected. But the ones I think are very much worth taking a look at are Halb Trocken. That means half dry. But you will have German consumers who are going to be confused because they're not going to believe you that Trocken means a dry wine. They're going to have some dim memory of a Trockenbeeren Auslese. That one really is like syrup. That truly, honestly is. So you don't have them yet, so it's not a problem. But I just want to bring it up because I may not be here to lead you through it when the time comes that you add these new ones. However, I do want to come back and do another tasting. So I want your critical feedback. You will not hurt my feelings about what you need and have not gotten from this tasting. My other hobby besides wine is paleontology. Some of you may have heard of the mini class I held in the wine cellar on fossils. I'm the one that provided Alice with the fossilized coprolite, the fossilized poop. Do you folks know about that? Fossilized species. I'm that person. I'm not only the wine lady, I'm the fossil lady. Where you are, right here, is a very, very famous geological site. All my texts on North Carolina, when they get down to the geology of this part of North Carolina, they go from this restaurant to a shopping center in Chapel Hill, and I want to tell you what happened in that space. And I really honestly think you can work this into conversations, and they'll be so impressed with how neat this place is and how neat this ground is. Not for every customer, the good Lord knows, but we don't have time to go into that now. But just to know you're on hallowed ground here. Okay, how do you pronounce these two? Think Schloss is German for castle. This is Johannesburg. That means John's Mountain. A castle on John's Mountain. That's what that means. J is pronounced like a Y. Think of Jarlsberg cheese. So it's Schloss Johannesburg. You will note that it is the only one here that does not have a producer name as well. They are the only one in all of Germany that the producer owns the whole growing area, so nobody but this family can make this wine. This was another one of those plums. This was a very, very early site. This is up here in the Rheingau. Now that's the most famous of the three German Rhine producing areas. Why? Because of geography. The Rhine River runs north-south. It has some bends to it. This is an entirely east-west part of the river, where the Rheingau is. In the northern hemisphere, the sun is going around, or everywhere, the sun is going around the equator. In the northern hemisphere, you want a south-facing hill because you get much more sunshine. You get the whole range of the hill. If you're on the north side, you're in shadow part of the time. Same for east and west. You've got a great amount of southern exposure there. That's why the wines are so famous there. This winery was given as a reward to Prince Metternich, who was the one who, in the Congress of Vienna in 1815, he's the one who kind of carved up Napoleonic Europe. Very, very important man. He was given the most famous Rhine site. Again, a very, very beautiful castle, and many of your customers will have been there. They certainly will know this property. They were the people who were credited with inventing the Spätlese and Auslese wines. In point of fact, it's literally not true because they have records going back to the Middle Ages, but before Prince Metternich had it, it was owned by an archbishop's domain that was quite a ways away, and the messenger, supposedly in the 1760s, got held up and could not bring word back, yes, you may start the picking. So by the time they were allowed to go into the field, the stuff had already started to rot on the vine, and that's where these late harvest wines supposedly came from. At the very least, they give them the credit. The second wine is another one of the wines from this middleman in Washington, like the Lorenzhofer, and my hope is that this one will be put on your by the glass pour, or at least somehow be made available for you to sell, because this one is a totally, totally organic wine. The woman who runs this, and that's another, I mean, when I sell it by telling them that she's the most famous winemaker in Germany, and there are not many women winemakers in Germany at all. I sell with a lot of sizzle, however. I tell people a lot of these details. As I'm telling you these details, I see little smirks around the crowd, so I suspect either they do not matter to you, or you don't feel you can fit them into your sales pitch. I, however, always do, and it's the thing that people remember. I get calls from wine stores all over the place. I had one from Asheville not long ago. There's somebody here talking about a wine that the Crusaders drank. What was it? People couldn't even remember the country, but they knew the Crusaders drank it, and the wine shop owner called me up. Or I get calls, somebody's here asking for a wine you recommended where the people had a messy divorce. All of that. I mean, a bad divorce, wine gets sold to raise capital. I mean, all of that is part of my sales pitch. If it is of yours, take it in and relook at the tape. If it is not, don't worry a darn thing about it. But this one is Bruder Dr. Becker. That U on the umlaut there means the two brothers, Dr. Becker. They're fine, elderly gentlemen, but the one who makes the wine is the daughter, Lottie. It annoys me as a woman in business that it does not say Bruder and Tochter, the two brothers and the daughter, but maybe I'm just ahead of my time. She was a leading light when she was in college in Die Grüne, the Green Party, the conservation party that's very, very big in Germany. Again, this is a movement that I feel will spread to the rest of the world. They were there with it first. And so she was a political leader, and she did her thesis when she went and got her master's in enology from the top German enology school on organic gardening. Very revolutionary stuff 10 years ago. No fertilizer at all. They use the stuff that Alison, natural fertilizer, they use dung. They don't add nitrogen to the soil or any of the elements that it's needed. No herbicides, no pesticides. They plant flowers and herbs and grasses and clover. So they oxygenate the soil through the grasses and clover. They lure the bugs away by planting plants that they like to munch on better than they like grapes, which is hard to do because grapes have a lot of sugar. The birds eat them. The deer eat them. In some areas, bears eat them. And God knows every microbe, every mold, every mildew, everything needs sugar to go. So, anybody will hit up these grapes. Another reason why keeping them for Spätlese and Auslese is a risky business, and hence you have to pay more for it. Okay, so woman winemaker, revolutionary, best organic winemaker in Germany. Terry Thies, this man I keep talking about in Washington, he decided to put together, he liked her wine so much, he had to wait 3 years to get them. Her production is that small that she simply did not have juice to spare to send to him. So he would go every single year and stay with the family and make nice and just kind of ingratiate himself in with them. So he wanted a whole portfolio of organic wines. We all have chemically sensitive customers. He couldn't find any that were equal to what she did. He's got this whole book here is Terry Thies wines. These are all the wines describing what he brings in, and these are the only truly organic wines that he has. The Lawrence-Hopper, the other one that you had, also has they use a number of organic procedures, but it's not as strictly organic as Lottie, that's the name of the Becker woman, as Lottie is. This also, by the way, just for those of you who are into fossils, which maybe nobody but me, but this is on limestone. All those little creatures, unusual for Germany, they don't have a lot of limestone. All those little creatures that died over those millennia and gave their little bodies and skeletons, that all adds complexity to the wine. The description of this wine. Okay, the best site in the winery. A chalk soil gives us this remarkable wine from Clone 90 of all things, that's too technical. Crystal clear, lovely light Riesling nose. Ideal harmony, fullness, weight, focus, great grit, excellent finish, absolute benchmark of German Riesling. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but it's easier, by the way, to do, it may be too late to tell you this, but to do your number 5 thoroughly before you head on to number 6, because it's a little hard to go back again. You have bread there. At least clear your palate if you're going to go back and forth. There's no bread? Okay. The number 5, the Schloss Johannesburg, is much more subtle, I think. which may make it a more comfortable recommendation for you. A lot of acidity in that. I like Lottie's wine. I like his description too. There's a picture of her, but I would have known she was not unlike me by the time I got to the picture, because he calls her all kinds of euphemisms. Hardy comes up 3 times in his description. She's not one of these little twiggy types. So she stands for everything I stand for. Okay. Can I see a show of hands of how many people prefer the Schloss Johannesburg? How many prefer Lottie's wine? Okay. You might want to, I'm now in the last, oh God, it's, am I through at 4?
Yeah, well, you have till 4:15.
Sorry. You might want to pass the 3 that were the clear favorites down. There was one in each flight that had most of the votes. So you might want to pass those bottles down, and you folks could pour yourselves a cold sample of number 6, number 4, and number 2. All of the even numbers. All right. The thing that's most important of all is the food compatibility. You have a problem here because we always want to buy the best. People are coming here to the Angus Barn not to grab a burger and get out in 4.5 minutes or however long it takes you to get your Burger King and hit the road. They are here for business dinners. They're here for anniversaries. They're here for graduations. They want to have a beautiful experience. They know it's not going to cost them only $5. There will, oh, there isn't enough of that one left to pass. Oh, don't open another one just to pass down. You don't want to sell them the highest end German wines if you want to do the food matching. They want the best. They think the best is Auslese, but Auslese is not the best food match for main courses. You want to sell them the Kabinett or the Spätlese. Okay. German wine has a beautiful affinity for a number of foods. 2, 4, and 6. I think you should pour those wines out and put them in the right glasses so you don't get confused. Okay, let me just keep talking, please, because I know I'm getting to the end of my time. Number 1 on the list of what German wine goes with: shellfish, cold or cooked, oysters, clams, shrimp, crab, lobster. You sell all that stuff. You are going to do your biggest volume in terms of coming to your bottom line, selling the wine and the food on the which your tip is going to be based. I hate to be venal here, but the whole picture is pleasing the customer with wine and food, but also getting them to, it's not the connoisseur that you are aiming at. You're not going to know as much about German wine as they are, and they'll be very able to pick through this list. There's not one thing on your current German list, not one selection, that is not from a really, really famous vineyard. So anybody who knows these kind of wines will come knowing it. Where your dollar added comes from, where your biggest addition to the bottom line is convincing someone who would not otherwise have wine to try wine. So, the iced tea drinker, that person who's considering having iced tea, mother's milk of the South, you can really easily convert that person to having a glass of German wine, even if everybody else at their table are in the Wild Turkey Wild Turkey Lounge is having Rob Roy's or screwdrivers or whatever, the person who would have that iced tea or even a white Zinfandel, they can be converted to these German wines. And if they have a glass before a meal, they will continue with that with their first course. And these wines go beautifully with most of your first courses, or appetizers, I'm sorry. Oysters Rockefeller, beautiful. Oysters on the half shell, sublime. Shrimp cocktail, don't miss a chance to pair German wine with a shrimp cocktail. I bet lots and lots of people buy that shrimp cocktail. That's a perfect possibility right there. You have this extraordinary red wine list because you emphasize mostly steak and then beautiful lamb. 80% of the wine consumed in the United States is white wine. 80%. So you've got to get that second wine, or actually the first wine. Have them have white wine with their appetizer and then have red wine with their dinner. Even if not everybody at the table gets it. A few people will have a glass of this wine. So the other thing that German wine goes beautifully with is any kind of fish. You have a number of fish on your menu. It's very lovely with salmon, beautiful with trout. When you fly into Germany and you land, that first thing you'll have when you land, the typical German meal is a bottle of Riesling and trout. Any of your fish would go with that, and it does stand up to a cream sauce with which a lot of wines will not. You do not have this here, but it, along with champagne, is the classic. Let me just finish this point. Is the classic sushi accompaniment. A number of the sushi dishes, the crabs and the egg custards, are a little bit sweet. So they go with the raw seafood, the raw Japanese food, but they also go with Chinese food of all sorts, because the entire Chinese cuisine, I know you don't have it here, but still it's kind of a neat thing to keep in mind when you're pairing food and wine. Chinese cuisine very much goes into that yin-yang, the balance of hot and cool, sweet and sour and bitter, all of those. There's always a little bit of sweetness in Chinese cuisine. So this wine goes very well. I don't think you pack picnic lunches, but it's a beautiful wine to go with salads that have vinaigrette, with salads that have mayonnaise, with cold chicken, with salami, with liverwurst, any of those things. With fatty meats, again, you do not have these except for the spare ribs. You have duck, goose, and pork. You don't have those, but the spare ribs either as a main course or an appetizer. I say it again, you need a wine with some sweetness to cut through the richness of those sweet foods and to balance out the sweetness of the preparation. Scallops are a sweet meat. You have the scallops Luigi, so that slight sweetness there will be beautiful. Even barbecued beef ribs. With that, if you're not going to get them to have a spicy Zinfandel, say, with it, or whatever it is that is your favorite recommendation for beef spare ribs, the sweetness of that sauce will do very nicely with one of these fuller Rieslings here. Okay, down to the wire. Who are the folks that you are going to sell this wine to? The ones who are considering not having a glass of wine to drink at all. The ones who are going for a white Zinfandel. You can bring them up the ladder and include the rest of their table with a sophisticated German wine. You couldn't do that with a white Zin. The perception is those are not good wines, even though a zillion trillion people drink them. But one of these German wines is the compromise between the white Zin iced tea drinker and the needs of the rest of the table. The health conscious. The fact that they are so low in calories. My friends from California care very, very much about having less of a better wine. And that's a trend that's gone on for the last 5 years. The sales of bulk wines are plummeting. Fine wines are holding even or going up. People would rather have a little bit of a better wine and not worry about taking in all the calories that bourbon and beer, and to a lesser extent, but still in people's perception, that wine give you. And the designated driver deal. There are people who need to watch what their drink intake is because they're the ones driving everybody home. Ma'am, 8% alcohol versus 13% alcohol. This is the safe wine to drink. Not only do you have the same amount of calories for the health conscious, the same amount of alcohol for the safety conscious, just the chemistry of it. It's not just more diluted, so it goes into your body more slowly and you can metabolize it more efficiently. It's buffered. It has the acids there, it's got dry weight minerals, all this stuff you don't need to go into, but it literally is not just slowing it down because it's more dilute. It's chemically locking it up with a number of other elements. So this is far and away the kind of wine that you can have some German wine, and unlike a Dristan, you can go work a tractor. You can go drive home after you have this wine. Okay, I'm in under the wire. Can we please have any suggestions of wines, 2, 4, or 6 that you think might go with particular dishes here that you might want to present as, if you were saying, oh, you're going to have the scallops or the soft shell crab, beautiful with Riesling. I have a whole little booklet here on which wine with fish. Virtually every fish that they mention, literally virtually, or actually in the shellfish and mollusks, I shouldn't say that, not every single fish. The only thing that they do not say that Riesling is the best accompaniment to, they say it's best for abalone, best for clams, crab, not best for mussels, best for oysters, scallops, shrimp, and baked squid, not for deep fried squid. But it's their first choice. All these millions of magazines I'm telling you about, they're talking about matching wine with salmon. A classic match is champagne. They throw that out. Champagne is too alcoholic. When you have high acid and rich foods, either fried foods like some of the ones you have here, or high fatty foods like pate or like your spare ribs, if you have high alcohol with those fatty foods, then it turns bitter. The alcohol turns bitter. So what do they say for salmon? However, one kind of wine stands out as the ideal salmon partner. It's the highest odds mate, meaning it will almost never not work. And it's usually the most delicious mate as well. The magic elixir is a light Riesling from Germany, either dry or with a touch of sweetness. As your folks read this stuff, they're going to come in and just wait for you to push them over the edge by saying, ma'am, I've had this one, and this Achbener Bachstein is delicious. It's not too flowery. It's not too sweet. It's a sophisticated and beautiful pairing. Last but not least is the issue of saltiness. Any food that is too salty, if you have, it's hard to match a high alcohol wine with a salty food. And of course, Chardonnay isn't just high alcohol, it's also high oak. That's very difficult to go against the sweet, delicate meat of shrimp or of scallops, that's the one your customers always want. How many of our customers come in, the only white wine they're willing to take a look at is Chardonnay. If you show them a better way, they will appreciate it, because low alcohol and salt, I've got a whole list of criteria why that's the case. There's not time to go into that. Just take it from me that high fat foods need a high acid wine. Salty foods need a low alcohol wine. German is both. And it's low alcohol and high acid without sacrificing anything. You have the aroma, you have the lingering taste, it's got the whole package with not many calories, and Germany poised to flood the world with their good goods, wine being among them. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.